Hello friends, my name's Kat. Welcome to my channel and to today's video where we're going to be talking about the Goodreads top 20 romantasy books for 2024. So we are going to be going over the top 20 nominees. I'm going to be reading them, reviewing them, telling you what ones I haven't read yet, and just talking about, are these the best romantasy of the year? So when you're seeing this, I should already have a romance version of this video up, so you can see that. I'll have it linked where you can see the top 20 romance. And later on this month, you can see the top 20 fantasy and top 20 sci-fi. So how we are going to be doing this video today. So first off, I'm going to tell you guys there's 4 that I am not reading out of this list of 20. We'll talk about those first. And then we're going to be kind of doing a mixture of vlog style and sitting down. So I will vlog one of the books that I haven't read. I think I have 7 that I haven't read. We will be vlogging those, and then in between the vlogs, we will sit down and talk about the books that I already have read. So that way, hopefully it will just be a little more interesting than me just sitting here telling you guys, like, reading off of a list. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We really we're gonna see today, are these books actually good? Like, do these really deserve to be in the top 20 of the year? Because I can guarantee that there are some misses, and there are some that I definitely do not agree should be in this list. So this is gonna be a long one, so get ready, get comfy, and let's just dive in. There are, as I said, there's 4 that I'm not reading, and some of them are for various reasons. Some I DNF the book themselves, and some I DNF the series. So let's start off with When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. This is seemingly one of the most divisive books of the year, where people either love it or they hate it. And I definitely fall in the latter category, where I have tried to read this twice. I tried to read it physically, I tried to read it on audio, and I DNF'd it both times because I honestly thought it was terrible. I thought the writing was bad, the world building was bad, there was not enough interest in the book, and it was just a very convoluted world building that made no sense, and the plot of the book itself was extremely confusing. I'm not going to get too much into it because, to be honest, at this point I feel like I have just blanked it completely from my mind because I disliked it so much. But there's a whole thing about dragons, and that wasn't great. Our main character is a mercenary or assassin or something. When I was reading it, I was kind of like getting into it, and then this potential love interest started, and it completely went off the rails for me in the sense that I found it so terribly written, this love part, that immediately I was out. I was like, there's no way I can continue on with this book. So for me, unfortunately, DNF'd it twice. Tried again on the audio, hated it even more the second time around. So yeah, this one, no go. And then I also DNF'd A Promise of Peridot by Kate Golden. So I read Adana von X last year, and I enjoyed it. It's just this world where there's different kingdoms. They are divided up on gemstones, and yeah, there's like different magic things. There's elves, and we're following like the Onyx kingdom as they're going to war with all these other kingdoms. I enjoyed that one. I actually really enjoyed it, but I made it about 20% into A Promise of Peridot, and I was just like, I don't care. There is nothing about this that I care about. I don't feel any attachment to the characters. I don't feel any interest in continuing on in this world, and I really don't care what happens anymore. Like, the story was interesting enough in the first book, but I would say not enough to make me want to continue on and learn more about the world, if that makes sense. And that book is DNF. And now we have 2 series DNFs. So first off, A Touch of Chaos by Scarlett Sinclair. Hate. Actually, is that the author? I don't know. I'll put it in. I forget who the author is. Anyways, hate this world so much. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling, and I just cannot get into this one. I deeply dislike the characters. I dislike their romance. I dislike the world that they're in, and I just find it very uninteresting. I don't even know if this is the main series, or there's also a spin-off series where we were following the exact same story from Hades' perspective, and that was unnecessary. I didn't like their relationship. I thought Hades was a terrible love interest in this one. Like, there's some books where he's, I don't know, represented in a better light, and I like those ones better. This one just did not like. And then Born of Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have DNF'd any of her series that take place in the I don't even remember the name of the series, but anything that take place in that from Blood and Ash series in that world. I read a few of them, enjoyed it, but then when I got to the one, I think it was book 4 in that series, I viscerally hated it so much I gave it a 1 star. And for context, I've given like 1 star in like the last 3 years, I think, and it was this book. So I just had such a fresh, intense hatred of this book, and I didn't like the characters. I thought everything was very, like, it just kept getting repeated, the same things over and over. And all the books, they didn't make sense, like, because we would just keep revealing new information that would completely disregard everything that we learned beforehand. The relationships are terrible. It felt like we were reading from a 15-year-old's perspective, and and that didn't really fit with all of the spicy scenes she was adding in. And there's just so many problems that I had with this. And I don't think that this is that main series. I think this book was from the spin-off series, which is following the ancestors of Poppy from Blood and Ash. And I read the first one in that series, enjoyed it, but again, couldn't get myself to continue on because I heard that it's just like basically an exact copy and paste of From Blood and Ash, like that series, and could not get myself to do it. Had zero interest in continuing, so this one is a no-go. So those very quickly are the four books I'm not reading. And now let's pivot over to starting to vlog some of the books that I haven't read. Hello, let's talk about the Spell Shop, which I'm currently in the middle of. So in this one, we are following a woman. She is a library at this, she's not a library, she's a librarian at the Great Library of this empire. And it's kind of I think in the capital city, and it's kind of, we're led to believe that that is the center of everything. And then there's like all of these outer islands and outer lands and everything that the emperor is still in charge of, but they are less involved. So there is a big rebellion going on. And at the moment, she and her assistant, who is a sentient potted plant, I love that, they are kind of panicking that the library might be burnt down and that a lot of the books might be lost. So they decide to pack up as many things as they can and basically steal them out of the library and go hide in the small island that she grew up on. So they steal a bunch of spell books, and when they get to this island, they start trying to have coming up with plans of how they are going to live, how they are going to survive, what they're going to spend their money on, how they're going to make money, how they're going to do all these things. And her family's house is in very big disrepair compared to when they lived there back when she was a child, because her whole family, they moved to the capital and her parents passed. But she somehow comes up with the idea that she just wants to make jam. She wants that to be her thing. She just wants to be a jam maker. But her little garden is falling apart. So she's like, okay, well, let's peruse these spell books, come up with a spell to quick start the growth of some plants and the growth of all of my fruit on this garden, and let's start growing jam. And it ends up, she realizes how well this spell works and kind of decides what if I were to start selling remedies? We're not going to call them spells, we're going to call them remedies, little remedies to the folk on the island to kind of help their lives. So in this world, magic is very illegal to use unless you are a regulated spellcaster, which seems to be something you have to go through a bunch of studies at the Empire to get through. But there used to be a regular retinue of spellcasters who would come to this island, and they would help all the problems because there's a lot of storm regulation that the spellcasters would have to do. They helped keep all of the plants alive, all of the trees. They helped the reproduction of these mer horses. So all these different things. And they have not been coming in years. So she's like, what if I start making little remedies? I pretend they are family recipes that have been passed down, and I start selling them to the locals to try and make their lives easier, while also selling jam. And that's kind of just where we're going, where we're following her cozy little life, setting up her jam shop, setting up her little spell casting business, all the experiments she's going through to test different things, while she and her potted plant are living in their little cottage. So I have to say, I am thoroughly enjoying this. I am deeply enjoying this one, but I don't see where the romantasy element is going to come in. I think this firmly should have been in the fantasy category. I am genuinely shocked that it is not, because every little bit about this is screaming fantasy to me. I know it's very hinted that she's going to have a relationship with one of the other farmers and they're going to get together, but it is still, even that, I feel it should just be fantasy. It should just be a cozy little fantasy of her making her jams and her spells. And I am deeply enjoying it though. So I have finished the spell shop. And okay, so I finished the spell shop, and I do have to say, really enjoyed this. Really liked it. I think it was misclassified though. This 100% should have been in the fantasy category. It does not fit in romantasy by any means. It is a cozy fantasy through and through. It has a slight romance in it, but there is no world where I feel this should be in romantasy. There is, it's just a fantasy with a romance subplot. And it is kind of hard sometimes to make that differentiation between what should be romantasy and what should also be pure fantasy. I understand that those lines are very easily blurred, but I think when you are thinking romantasy, that romance has to be the forefront. It should be the primary plot of the book, and the fact that it's in a fantasy world is secondary. The romance is like kind of the driving factor of what we're looking at, and that wasn't the case in this one. It was just a subplot. It was just something that kind of happened towards the end, and there's a mild flirtation, but otherwise it was really not hardcore romance. And yeah, I will die on this hill that this should not have been in the romantasy. 100% cozy fantasy, but I deeply enjoyed it. I just think this is a mistake, but it is a fantastic cozy fantasy. One of those books that you go into low stakes. You know, you are not stressing. You know that the like small problems are just basically going to be like a person's day-to-day life. Like those are going to be the things that you follow, and that are the issues. And I love a cozy fantasy. I have to say, like, I find them very comforting. I find them very relaxing, and they are something that, yeah, I thoroughly enjoy at this point. And there's a very fine line with cozy fantasy, I find, where it goes too boring or it just stays at that perfect, like, we are just dealing with small problems. And I think this one like perfectly fit, because there was some drama, there were some issues happening, but none of it was like stressful. It wasn't like life and death. They were just like small things happening that we were worried that our character's life would be upended a little bit, and it was perfect for that. I really enjoyed like just the community building and our main character like making a life for herself and really like finding a way to be happy in this community, and basically just finding a way to live and like for everything to be okay. I thought that was fantastic, and those are the type of things that I thoroughly enjoy in a cozy fantasy. So yeah, giving it 4 stars. It was overall just super enjoyable, and I'm very happy with it. And now that this is done, we're going to talk about 2 more books before we go back into the vlog section. So next we are going to talk about Feybound, which is another one that I kind of thought would be more fantasy leaning as well. This one I am okay with it being in romantasy. Like, I do think that the romance subplot ended up being a fairly significant part of the book, but it was also one of a romance that didn't work for me. So we're following 2 sisters. They're elves, and they have basically been like outcasts from their society. They both leave and end up coming across Fae, who they had thought had died out like thousands of years before. So they end up being brought into this Fae community where they live underground in secret. And while there, one of them gets involved with like a general, and the other one just kind of really like, I can't remember, she also gets in, or no, she gets into a romance with a warrior who had been traveling with them. And I did enjoy this one quite a bit. I gave it 4 stars because I really enjoyed the world building. I thought it had a very unique magic system. I really enjoyed seeing like this group, like them going into this Fae society and just seeing, like, learning all about the different societies, because the elves and the Fae lived very differently. They had very different beliefs, very different ways of living. But it's really hard, like, when you are not rooting for the romance. Is in particular one of the sisters, and I guess I can't remember if she was a general or a princess. She was like a mix of those two. I just wasn't on board with their relationship. Like, I didn't feel like it made sense, and I didn't feel like it necessarily like felt romantic in a lot of ways. It felt like it was just an attraction and they wanted to sleep together, and that's fine. I didn't feel like there was any romantic feeling between them, and it didn't really feel like they were a good fit either. Like, I felt like they had such opposing views of the world and stuff, and it just didn't like it didn't feel like a sustainable relationship, and which is kind of silly, but it just like wasn't enough. Yeah. And otherwise, like, the world building in this one, super interesting. Really liked the magic. Like I said, I did enjoy our 2 main characters, and I kind of wanted more, I guess. And I'm really excited actually to see, like, I think the sequel's coming out fairly soon, and I actually am really excited to get into this one because I'm hoping that we learn like significantly more about this world, which I'm very excited for. And the other one we're going to talk about right now is Restless Stars, which is book 9 in the Zodiac Academy series, and also thankfully the final book in the Zodiac Academy. I have the craziest mixed feelings ever about Zodiac Academy. I hate it and like it in equal parts, I would say. And I feel like every book I've read, I've alternated between whether or not I love or hate it, because I was gonna say well-written garbage, but I don't even think it's well-written. I think it's just entertaining garbage. And I don't think it's well written. I don't like the characters. I don't like the way they speak. I didn't like a lot. I felt like it went on too long. I didn't like a lot of the drama, but I enjoyed the world. I enjoyed the magic system. I enjoyed like the setup in general for it. And I did think it was very addicting, because it is one of those books where this in a non-terrible way. I'm saying it felt kind of like a train wreck where you could not look away because you just had to see what happened. And it was very much like that, where so much ridiculous shit was happening, but I had to know because I was addicted. And I think actually it reminds me a bit about like a reality TV show where you don't necessarily like any of the people in it, but you are there for the drama. And I think that's kind of like the perfect way to describe my feelings about this, is that I was thoroughly entertained, but I did not enjoy this series. And anyways, that is my long-winded way to say I'm glad the series is over. I think it went on too long, and the best part of this book in the best part of this book was the ending, because there was a very extended epilogue where you saw how everybody's lives wrapped up. And just I'm a fool, and I got a little bit too invested in that part, and I did get a little emotional because I just love seeing happy endings. But yeah, it was too long a series. And yeah, I think if anybody wants to go into Zodiac Academy, you very much have to know that it is not great, but very much go into it and expect that you'll have fun for what it is, because it's ridiculous. And now I'm currently reading Quicksilver, and I am 70% into it, and I'm loving it. I am loving this one. This is one that's been very popular lately, and I understand why. So we're following a young girl. She's in this human world, and their kingdom, it's like divided up into different wards. So she's in the third ward, which basically means that, well, they're the plague wards, so they are isolated from everyone. And she sneaks out and steals like a gauntlet that belongs to one of the Queen's Guard, gets caught, and is brought to the Queen's prison to be executed. While there, she gets her whole hands on this magical sword and activates this essence known as Quicksilver. And Quicksilver is basically the substance that allows transport between different realms. And because she activates it, it brings a Fae warrior into her world. They had been thought to be like, actually, is it Fae or elves? I don't remember. But anyways, they were thought to have been like a mythical creature. Like they didn't actually exist. And it's been like thousands of years since they've been seen. So she brings him into the realm. He like manages to help her escape and brings her back to his realm. It turns out that she is a magical user, like a unique magic user known as an alchemist. They were thought to have all been wiped out, but she is one of the few people who's able to activate this Quicksilver and allow people to travel through realms, and also make relics that basically enable people to travel through the Quicksilver without going crazy. So she has been now brought like on board by their king to like, she's made a deal with them basically where she will help create all of these relics. She'll help transport warriors over, and in return they will bring her back to her world eventually. And there is a potential romance starting between her and I guess the king's stepson named Kingfisher, who is this like very renowned and dark warrior who has some, we don't know quite the details yet, but he has something going on that the Quicksilver kind of drives him crazy. It kind of makes him a little insane. But he is also like a crazy well-known warrior for the last 100 years apparently. Like he's been exiled from the kingdom. We don't know why, but he is a bit of an asshole, but a sexy asshole, and there is something happening between them. I'm really enjoying it. It has so many things that like completely tick every box for me, and this, I can genuinely say, it is giving me a Court of Mist and Fury vibes. There's just certain things that are happening in it that are very much giving me that vibe, and I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying it a ridiculous amount. So I am really happy. I don't know if this will end up being like a 5-star like it has been for so many people, but I am deeply enjoying it. I'm gonna try to finish it tonight because yeah, I'm just having like such a great time with it. Hello. So we finished Quicksilver, and you know, I'm not surprised. I don't think anybody's surprised, but it ended up being a 5-star read for me. It honestly was just the perfect blend of literally everything I love in romantasy. And I think that kind of is what worked out so well for me, is that it just had so many classic romantasy things that I tend to get obsessed with. And yeah, everything just worked out fantastically. Like it all added to just such a fun story that I 100% can get behind. And I love the characters. I love the story. I love the world building. There were a few reveals at the end that I just 100%, they got me. And there weren't like anything crazy that like completely like upended the book or anything, but there were just enough of things that I was like, oh, this is big. This is a fun moment. And yeah, it just had like a lot of very like just, you know, there was the very classic things of like, we have a 1,000-year-old Fae king or Fae Dark Lord, I guess. Maybe not Dark Lord, but a Fae man who kind of gives off Dark Lord or shadow daddy vibes, and a young like 20-something girl. Why not a 20-something human? They're kind of what always happened in these books, but it works for a reason, I guess. And I'm just saying that because it's one of those things that like I was trying recently to describe to my husband, like jokingly describe to him what the basic plot of like every romantasy book I read is, and that was it. I was like, it's always there's a couple 100-year-old fae and a 20-year-old illiterate girl. It's not wrong. Like, I was saying that as a joke, but it's very accurate. I really like this one. I'm really happy with it. I think that, yeah, it just had the perfect amount of suspense. The relationship was really fun to follow, and I really cared for the characters. So all in all, 5 stars. And I feel like I'm very much somebody who I don't necessarily need like the most complex plots ever in a romantasy for it to be 5 stars. I am honestly, this is the one place that I am the most basic person ever. And if it has a few tropes that I like, if it has a few plot points that I like, I'm going to be hooked. I'm going to be addicted. It doesn't take that much for me to completely eat it up. So yeah, 5 stars. It wasn't anything too complicated, but I'm fine with that. And now we shall talk about 2 more books. So one of them, The Honey Witch, is one that I do own a copy of downstairs. I just don't feel like going to grab it right now. Editing me will definitely regret that choice. But in this one, we're following a young woman who learns from her grandmother that she is a honey witch, which basically just makes her like the guardian of this island. And there are certain curses that have been imposed on honey witches where they are never supposed to have somebody fall in love with them. It's either nobody's ever going to fall in love with them or they're not allowed to fall in love with anybody, but there's some repercussion to that curse. And also she's just kind of her main goal is to protect the island from an ash witch, which is just a witch who's presumably going to come in and destroy everything. So honey witch, very much just think cottagecore, like earthy witch, somebody who's just there to really be one with nature and commune with all the plants and everything. So our main character's living her happy life. She just became a witch, and one of her friends brings along a friend of his to visit the island, and it is this kind of like surly young woman who really is questioning whether or not magic exists, and there's a little bit of a romance between them. This is kind of a hard one for me to rate because I feel like it's very much, I'd say, a 3.5 for me, because there were a lot of aspects that I didn't really connect with. Like, I feel like the relationship, I was never 100% on board with it just because I don't feel like the characters necessarily, like, I don't know, I just didn't feel that connection as much between them. And at the same time, it definitely got boring at points because this is, sorry, I need to fix these. I apparently can't really talk and do my eyebrows well because I went in way too heavy with that. This is one where I definitely was bored during parts of it because I feel like this is an issue that needs to be very closely like monitored and not closely monitored, but like very closely worked upon in cozy fantasies, where sometimes the plot is just too boring. Like, cozy fantasies, they're great, I find, when there's not a crazy amount of like really intense dilemmas that are going on. There's not a lot of huge plot points that are like stressful or emotional, but at the same time you can kind of veer into the territory where there's just nothing happening and it feels like you're just reading pages and pages of the same thing. And this one slightly went into that direction for me, unfortunately, where I think we could have used a little bit more stress, a little bit more worry about what was going on with this potential ash witch, and just a few more things to get us really invested in the story and really care about what's happening. But at the same time, the general premise of just a woman on her island, she's with her bees and everything, was so inherently relaxing to me, and it was just so cozy and something that I was so intensely into. And that did really weave through the book too. It's just something that I personally found very relaxing and cozy, but it just needed a little bit more. Like, maybe potentially if I was more invested in the relationship, I would have been a little bit more hooked on the book, because there were parts that dragged for me, and that's what definitely is not letting it stay like a 4-star for me. What's bringing it down a little bit to a 3.5, because there were aspects that I was bored, and unfortunately I don't want that in a bock. Yeah, so it's one I wish I was more connected with the plot instead of just the general themes. I did like this. I love a cottagecore vibe, and I have a feeling that maybe I like the cover of this one a bit more than I like the book, and I kind of hate to say that, but I think unfortunately it might be a little true in this case. And unfortunately, one of my most disappointing books of the year was Gold by Raven Kennedy. And I overall really like the Plated Prisoner series. It is not one for everyone by any means. It is a fae romance with a lot of very dark tones to it. And I absolutely do not see this series for everyone. Like, I know a lot of people who couldn't get past the first book because it was very explicit and had very dark tones to it. But overall, I have really enjoyed this series. Unfortunately for this one was like, well, unfortunately, this was a major miss in the series for me. And I think the main part is that our main character who we're following, her name is Oren. She is separated from the main love interest in this one and goes into an entirely new realm. So we are introduced to so many new things in this one. Like, it's the 5th book in a series, the second last one. And we're introduced to an entire new world. We're introduced to all these new characters. Everything is different. And the main thing that I was getting, like the main thing I really enjoy about this series is the relationship between Oren and her love interest. And unfortunately, this book had none of that. So it's one of those things where like the main thing that really keeps me wanting to go in this one wasn't there. So obviously that is like a huge deterrent to the story itself for me, because I want to be there. I want to see this relationship. I want to see what's going on next with them. And also I really feel like this was an unnecessary addition to the series. Like, this book itself didn't really need to be here, if we're being honest. And yeah, so because we're in this new world, we're not with all of the main characters, it felt like there was no character development, and it also felt like there was essentially no development towards the plot. It really just felt like it was a little side side story of our main character going through this little thing, and I didn't like that. I don't think that was really necessary to the story, and it absolutely could have just like not happened or been a tiny portion of the next book, and I think we would have came out with the exact same feeling of it, or like the exact same point would have been made, unfortunately. And again, we're following some side characters too in this one that I don't care about. I don't think we necessarily need to see this much of their story. I don't know, like, this one was a miss. I ended up giving it 2 stars, unfortunately, because I wasn't invested. I wasn't enjoying it. I really felt like it was just a stop, like, kind of side adventure, kind of like pointless adventure in the story, and not for me. So that one, sadly, a miss. And I'm now currently starting on The Fate of the Sun King, which I'm 30% into it. And this is the 3rd book in a series. It's a series that I'm not particularly enjoying. The first book I thought was fun. It had this like really fun kind of like Bachelor-esque competition dynamic where our main character was taken out of this prison where she was and basically brought in to compete against all of these other women to see like who would be the, I don't know if it was the Sun King, but like the, who would become wife of this king. So there was like this huge competition aspect. It was very fun. And I liked the first book. I thought it was super fun, solid 3-star. Didn't really like the second one because we go into an entirely different world. Not really, but like an entirely different type of story. And I just wasn't as invested by the time that I got there. It had been too much time since I'd read the first one. Couldn't really get into it. And then on this one, once again, just my interest waned even further. So 30% in, and I'm not particularly enjoying it. I'm gonna finish it, but it's one that like, I think if there were if I was picking it up for any other reason, I would DNF it. I decided I might as well finish it. It shouldn't really take me that long. Even though it is like 500 pages, it's a very quick 500 pages to read, if that makes sense. And I wrote down 2 notes for myself to talk about this one. The first one is that I think we're following too many perspectives, so it feels like the story is a little bit too disjointed because we're following perspectives in like current timeline and a past timeline and a bunch of different people across this world, and there's just too much going on. It feels like there's just too many stories happening, so it's a little hard to get really into it. And my other note is that there's a king named Cyrus, and that is one of my cat's names, and I'm like, yeah, 100% down. Cyrus deserves to be king. Let's go. And those are my only notes. So I'm gonna finish that one and then I'll check in later. Hi, I'm done Fate of the Sun King. And you know, this series is not for me. I think like 100% I just kind of need to accept at this point that this is not a series that I can get on board with. I keep trying to like it. I keep trying to get into it, and it is not my thing. So yeah, it's a 2-star. I don't know. I think this is like just very mid, and the writing's not great. Feels a little juvenile. And yeah, this one, again, like pretty much just mirroring what I was saying earlier. We're following way too many perspectives. Way way too many, and it just was not something I could get into, could not get like invested in any of it. And I do have to say, there was the worst nickname ever, which is Lightning Bug, and the sheer fucking amount of times that this was brought up is terrible. So yeah, I'm giving it 2 stars. I did not enjoy this. I did not enjoy it at all. It didn't actively hate it, and that is the one thing that kind of distinguishes like a 1 star for me, is if it's something I actively hate, but cannot say I liked it. Yeah, I don't know. If there's any more books in this series and if they're nominated for any more Goodreads awards in the future, I think I'm just gonna have to like suck it up and not finish them, because I just can't with this author. I can't with this series. I just can't get myself to care and want to read anything else in this. So, and as always, let's now kind of go in and talk about a few more. So the next one that I want to bring up is Apprentice to the Villain by, I think, Hannah something. Apparently I'm not good at keeping just track of names at the top of my head, but this is one. It was a little mixed, I guess. So the first book in the series came out last year, and it was Assistant to the Villain. We're just following this like weird fantasy world where there's a villain who is against the king, and we have a main character who is just like becoming his assistant, and they kind of start to fall for each other. So in this one, a lot of stuff like happened at the end of book 1. It ended at a crazy cliffhanger, and it kind of just started off like immediately in that action scene. And in this one, our assistant, the main character, she really progresses from being more of like his assistant, who is just kind of there to keep the office running, to somebody who is this villain's right hand, because she really realizes that like his whole journey is something that she can really get on board with, and she 100% agrees with like why he's trying to take down the king. So this series, I think, is so ridiculously fun. It is so not serious, and that is one thing that like you really have to be okay with that kind of writing, which I know a lot of people aren't, where it's, you're going into something just kind of like silly and funny. You really have to go into these books kind of with that mindset, and you will have a great time. But like, again, like I know it's not for everyone. Like somebody like Brandon Sanderson, when he writes funny books, I'm not here for it. So it just kind of depends on, I think, the writer and your sense of humor. But these are just very ridiculous. It is like silly workplace drama, but in a fantasy castle, and just all of these like ridiculous little things that are going on, like these HR issues with the interns, kind of shit like that. But at the same time, they are very much like plotting a takedown of a kingdom and trying to bring down a king, and dealing with all of these like interpersonal problems and a potential romance between like the assistant and the villain. And I really like these books. I eat them up. I think they are like ridiculously fun. And for me, they're always ones that like, I mean, by always, this is just the second book, but they are ones that I have been thoroughly enjoying. So like I just have the most ridiculously fun time reading it. Like I'm just giggling along and like having the best time ever. So yeah, I like these ones a lot. I think they're great. I think they're super fun. But this is one I 100% see why it is not for everyone, because I can see how much it is like just really not a serious kind of book. But yeah, I give this one 4 stars. I thought it was so much fun. And the other book I was going to talk about right now is Phantasma, which has been like a crazy hit the last few months, and like one that I think I would have truly been shocked had it not been part of the nominees, because it has absolutely taken like the romantasy girlies by a storm, and I think with good reason. And also it came out at the absolute perfect time. Like it came out early fall, and this is, I will say, the best spooky Halloweeny read that has come out in a while. Like it came out at the perfect time for the perfect audience, and also it was a book of the month choice, so that really impacts a lot of books. Like not as many romantasy, because they don't tend to have as many in the book of the month, but romance, fantasy, sci-fi, like anything that is in one of the book of the month boxes, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be like a nominee at some point. Oh, I like that shade. So anyways, this one, we are following a young witch. Her mother passes away and she inherits powers to basically her power. It's not super well explored in the book, but she is able to communicate with the dead. And there is this like notorious game that goes on in this world called Phantasma, where this traveling house basically moves around and people are able to enter with one winner per each game. But it's like this notoriously dangerous game where people die all the time. People like make bargains to get out of it. People come out with like curses, like, but if you win, you get like your heart's desire. And it is one that our main character, Ophelia, never had any interest in entering until after her mom dies. She learns that there had been a very, very significant debt left for her. And she decides to enter. Also after finding out that her younger sister, who has no magical powers, decided to enter as well. And she thinks that this is, well, she pretty much enters to protect her sister, but also with the intention of if she wins, she wants to like save her family home and save, you know, their expenses and everything. But Phantasma is such a fun game where there's all of these different levels corresponding to different like sins. I guess you could almost say like different deadly sins. I don't think they perfectly match up, but every level corresponds to a certain devil and there is a certain like sin associated. So there's lust, there's wrath, there's gluttony, there's like all of these different ones. And in each level, people go in, you have to win the level to move on, but people die in the levels, people lose, and a lot of people like will make bargains with the devils who are setting it on to like save their life to get out because they realize they are going to die if they don't. And it was honestly super fun. This is one that like I didn't think was the best writing. That's the only reason like I gave it a 4-star, didn't give it a 5 because of that. I didn't think that it had like the best writing of all time, but it is one that I went into and I thoroughly enjoyed and thoroughly had so much fun with because it was just like a good competition paranormal kind of fantasy book, which those are all things that I absolutely love. There's a bit of a romance, and that was one of the things that like I didn't 100% get behind. It felt kind of weird to me, but there is a romance, and I mean obviously if it's in romantasy, and it, yeah, to be honest, I didn't really like the romance. I didn't really like the romantic character either, and I did feel like it's one that the ending wrapped up a little bit too quickly and it kind of left me wanting some more. But overall, very, very fun read, and I think this was like a really good romantasy, like definitely deserving to be one of the most popular reads of this year, and like one that I really understand the hype for, but at the same time I think it is like a little bit overhyped for what it actually was, but I understand why it was so popular. Hi, we're a little under halfway through the game's God display, and very happy to report that I'm actually like pretty much enjoying this like a crazy amount. So there is in this world this like big competition, I think it's called the Crucible, that takes place every 100 years. So each of the gods choose a human champion basically who competes in this competition. So there's like a different competition that each of the gods brings forward. Why is my dog crying? Who knows? But each of the gods have a competition, and the winner, or whoever wins, I guess the most of these, I think there's like 12 gods. So whoever wins the most ends up being the winner of this Crucible, and the human champion who wins, they get a boon from the gods, and also whoever their god who sponsored them, that god ends up being the ruler of Olympus for the next 100 years. It's something like that. So our main character is a thief. She was cursed when she was a baby by Zeus to never have anybody love her. So basically her mother went into labor in one of Zeus's temples, and because of this he thought that was like a huge affront to him, so he's cursed her. This also takes place in modern times, just by the way, but she's a thief. She is kind of just living her life doing that, and somehow gets the attention of Hades, and he gets something goes on where very shortly after she gets his attention, they meet up, all this stuff, but then he decides to enter the Crucible for the first time ever. So for the first time, he is now part of this competition, and he is a champion who is our main character. So we're following her as she's going through all these different trials, and also trying to figure out what Hades' game is, because why now? Why does he now? It's hinted that Persephone, his wife, recently died, so maybe that's something to do with it, but it also very much seems like there's going to be a relationship between our main character and Hades. So it's very much just like a bunch of trials, a bunch of fighting, a bunch of these competition things, and I am enjoying it. I do have to say for sure. Definitely into it. I don't think it's fantastic, but it is entertaining for sure. All right, I definitely ended up enjoying this a fair amount, definitely more than I was expecting just based on some of the reviews I heard. But I will say this trial aspect that was going on, it did end up being a little bit repetitive at one point, and there was like 12 trials to get through, and after a while that kind of just got tedious to keep reading about them. Like I kind of just wished anything but a trial was happening. And also our main character, she I don't want to say she cared too much, but she was way too concerned about all of the other competitors living, which I know is supposed to be a good thing. We're supposed to really care about that. We're supposed to like see that she's a good person and get happy about that. But it kind of just came to this point where she was 100% just ignoring everything like logical to the detriment of like achieving anything. And all she cared about was saving them, like even the people who were actively trying to kill her. And it just felt unrealistic. If we're being very honest there, that part just felt a little extreme and ridiculous. There was also a you know, romance element between Hades and our main character, and I don't know if I was fully into that part. Like, I don't know if I fully bought the romance and if it really did anything for me. Honestly, the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm like questioning my rating, because I did like walking out of this, I was immediately like, yeah, it's 4-star. Now I'm kind of questioning if it should be more of a 3, but I think I had fun reading it. I had good vibes with it. There was just like a lot of things that I can kind of nitpick, if we're being honest. So I'm gonna stick with 4, but just know that it's kind of like, that could be questionable. And then the next one that we are going to talk about is The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. So this is book 1 in a new fantasy romance series, and we're following basically the princess to a magical realm, and she is found like sneaking out of the palace. She has this like rebellion relic on her, so she ends up being arrested by these guards and brought to a royal prison. Then the actual rebels break in and are rescuing one of their own when somebody notices that she has this relic, and they're like, you know what, we can't just leave her, let's take her along. And then from there she ends up being brought to this rebel camp and basically told that she needs to join with them or die, because now she knows their location. So she does that, and the entire time is like kind of keeping her identity secret, and is now under the training of this very merciless guy who ends up kind of becoming like a love interest with her. And it's definitely like a bully romance in a lot of ways. And like, I thought that this was actually pretty enjoyable. It was very fast paced. It definitely kept my attention, and it was like a relatively short book, so that was kind of nice too, where it was just like something super quick, something super fun to get through. Didn't in a lot of ways, I'd say, feel like it had too much substance, but it really worked for this one, where you're going in for just like a fun time and nothing super serious. There weren't like that many like crazy things happening, but there was enough that like I was engaged, you know, like I was interested with what was happening, and I wasn't bored at any point. Didn't love the romance itself. That kind of bully romancing, it's not for me. I really find them to be kind of gross. They give me a bit of an ick, and I didn't feel like there was enough like emotional development between the characters. Felt very like spicy, and that was about it. Otherwise though, I do have to say I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed just like that fast-paced nature of it, and just the fact that we were thrown into the story and had a fun time going through it. So I really don't have like that many complaints about this one. I think I gave it 4 stars as well. And again, another perfectly enjoyable book. Just like wasn't fantastic. If you're going into this one, it's very much like you're just going in for a fun time with very little substance. So I'm gonna start another book. We are almost done, and then I'll come back. Tonight I started on Blood of Hercules, and anyways, binged the entire thing in one night because I got so ridiculously into it. This book is potentially one of my favorite romantices of the year, and I always want to say that I have good taste in books, but I can genuinely say that, like, you know, there's a lot of garbage that I rate really highly, and I'm kind of feeling like this is one of them, where like objectively when I'm looking back on it, it had major flaws, and there were like potentially not the best writing, but also I give it a 5-star, and I have not been able to stop thinking about this book since I finished it. So like I like realistically probably have zero taste in anything, but if you give me a like why choose romance and something to do with like a magical school or something, I'm gonna love it. So this one, the world is incredibly complicated. It took me a while to figure it out, but basically like it's the human world, but a certain number of years ago Titans came back and started attacking people, and because of that the like Greek gods also came down and started like fighting against them. And for some reason, the only people who can fight them are like descendants of the Greek gods, so their children. And their children have certain powers, their children do these things. It doesn't seem like the Greek gods themselves fight, just their children. And I think it's based on the age. I think it's been like 30 years before they came back. Hank, leave them be. Come here. And yeah, so I think it's 30 years prior to the start of this book this takes place, because just based on the ages of all the kids, that kind of fits. But the world has completely collapsed because these Titans are like attacking everything, and now the Spartans kind of rule everything. And their kids are like celebrities in the world because there's not a lot of them, and they are like incredible warriors, and because of their half god things, they're all like super sexy and apparently have all these reputations for like just sleeping around like crazy. So our main character, she is 19 at the start of this book, and every 19-year-old goes through this test to see if they can get accepted to one of the few universities that remain. She really wants to do it, but also part of this, they do a blood test, and when she does this little blood test, it indicates that she is part Spartan, part Olympian, and she immediately gets drawn like to this huge battlefield and this fighting thing to see like if she can be part of the Olympian Spartan warriors. It's very convoluted, I will say, and a lot of the world building doesn't really make that much sense. It's not as well explained as I kind of would want it to be. And the first, like a big portion of the start of the book was incredibly confusing. But at the same time, I cannot believe how into this book I was. Like as soon as I kind of got a sense of what was going on and like a sense of where the world was going, who our main characters were, what the setting is, then I got so addicted. Because part of it, so there's this huge, like all of the 19-year-old Spartans, they go into this arena, they have to fight to the death until there's 10 remaining because they want to weed out the weakest. And then after that, those are each assigned a mentor, and they go into like a year-long training that is intensely, like it's called, I think, the Crucible or something like that, where basically it's this intense training and anybody who falls behind is killed. And our main character, she ends up being assigned to Achilles and Patroclus. They are a couple who's together. They're two of the most like insanely dangerous like fighters, and yeah, they're her mentor. There's also this weird, like I'm not even going to get into it too much, but there's a different distinction based on like there's either Spartan or Cluthonin, something like that, and it depends on the type of powers you have. It's a lot, and this is like the most convoluted explanation I can ever give of this book. I feel like you kind of just have to go into it and like accept the vibes, but it was so good. I absolutely was addicted. It was like one of those books that like as I'm making dinner, I'm holding it reading. As I was letting my dog out, still holding reading. Like I was walking around the house reading this book because I could not put it down. And I gave it 5 stars entirely because of the vibes. As soon as I started thinking about it a little more and thinking about the world building and the problems, like probably not a 5-star, but my obsession level with it, that is what gives it that. And yeah, that kind of took up my entire night. So now that I'm done Blood of Hercules, let's quickly talk about 2 of the other ones I've read. And this is going to be very quick because both of these I have like 0 thoughts about. So first off, A Crown That's Cold and Heavy. I did listen to this on audio, I think like in March of this year. So it's been a while, and I also don't really like this series that much. I'll be very honest and say I think this is an incredibly flat series that doesn't have a lot interesting happening in it. It's this world where people are granted their magical powers at 21 or 18, something like that. But if you've accessed your magic before that, you're supposed to be killed and your entire family killed. And we're following a young girl who she accesses her magic early, her family goes on the run, and then she infiltrates like the palace to try and like free everybody who's been captured to be killed for this. And then the story goes on from there. It goes wildly different, but I enjoyed the first book, didn't like any of the others, and I feel like this story has just gone flat overall. Uninteresting, not one I'd recommend. And then I don't want to talk about this one, House of Flame and Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Probably my most disappointing book of the year. Just like the first book in this series is probably my favorite book of all time, and it's like tied with Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson for my favorite book. And the series has just progressively gone downhill. This one was so disappointing, and I can very much say I've blocked it out of my mind at this point, where I do not think I've thought about it at all, because I'm like very actively trying to not think about the stuff that happened and what has disappointed me. So this one, unfortunately, we can very much say is not my favorite. I think this one won by the time this year. Like, I'm pretty sure it's won, which is not surprising because it's Sarah J. Maas, but like, did not deserve it. And now I am listening to A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saff, and this is my last book that I need to finish for this video. I'm a little over 50% into it right now, and I do have to say I'm not really vibing with this one crazy amount either. I've read one other book from her and wasn't my favorite, so I can't say I'm exactly surprised, but this one, I think it is the only sapphic romance on this series, in this list, which yay yay, we got one representation book, but like also boo, that's truly terrible. But we're following two academic rivals and their slow romance as they are like part of this expedition to discover some type of magical creature. They're both scholars, it's a magical world, and that's kind of part of it. Like the biggest thing right now is just they're on this expedition together. One of their mentor was killed on this expedition. They're trying to find out who did it. Well, also there's this magical creature that they're trying to find, and it was this mission that was set on them by the king. Don't have too much else to say about it right now, but I am going to try to finish this today. Alright, so I finished Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Soft, and I really wish that her books are for me, but they unfortunately like really aren't. One second, okay. Yeah, I just really don't think her writing's for me, and I feel really unfortunate about it because I think that this book had so many things that could have worked for me. I'm just like not into her writing. This one, it has like an academic rivals, it has so much yearning, it has this magical quest, it has a murder mystery, like so many things that typically I would really be into in a book, but I don't get along with her writing. Like it never really ends up working for me. There's always something that just like doesn't connect, and this is the second book I've read from her. I will say this was so much better for me than the last one, which was A Fragile Enchantment. That did nothing for me. That one was like such a flop. So at least this one I did enjoy, I do have to say, but it wasn't any more than a 3-star. So like I feel completely fine about it. I feel completely neutral about it. It's just like I can't really with good conscience say that I enjoyed it any more than that. It was decent. It just wasn't anything spectacular. So with that, we've read all the books, and the only other one I haven't talked about is A Fate Inked in Blood, which I'll say very similar thoughts actually, where it was a 3-star. It had so many things that typically I would like it had an arranged marriage, it had like Norse gods, it had like a fated warrior, just so many things that typically I would go into it enjoying, but it just kind of fell flat for me. And I feel like that's pretty much every book that I've read by Danielle Jensen is just a solid 3-star. We've done it. We have read all 20 of the romantasy nominees. Overall, I do have to say I think that this was kind of a flop of a category. I like didn't read a lot of them because they're a series that I'm really not interested in. A lot of the ones I read were kind of terrible, if we're being honest. And when I look at it, like the majority of my ratings are like 3 stars, which I'm really disappointed in. Like I think that there were so many better romantasy books that came out this year, so many other ones that maybe like wouldn't have been nominated because they're more like vampire or shifter related or something. Like there's just so many other ones that I can think of that I enjoyed so much more. And I might do a separate video on that, just kind of talking about ones that like what actually was the best romantasy that came out this year, or the best romantasy maybe just that I read this year, because I don't think that these are very good representations of the genre. And if somebody was just reading this, I don't think that they would necessarily have the best feeling about it. So looking at it too, I decided I'm gonna say my worst book that I read of this. Kind of hard to decide. I think it might be A Crown This Cold and Heavy, just because I remembered nothing about it. Like I have no thoughts, nothing about it. Don't really remember much of the story, the characters, or anything. So like clearly it wasn't memorable. But in the same vein, it could be House of Flame and Shadow because I was so disappointed in it. And the best one, shockingly, this might just be because I finished it like 2 days ago, but shockingly, I'm gonna give it to Blood of Hercules. I loved that one. Like I genuinely think that it was an incredible book, and I have been raving about it to some of my friends who like, I think they already think I'm a little crazy because they like did not see the hype, but I loved it. It had like everything that I love in it. And I am going to go in and read all of this author's backlist because I really want to see like if any of her other books will work for me. So thanks for watching today's video. We should within like, I'm hoping I can do one a week. So next week and then the week after we'll have the top 20 versions of sci-fi and fantasy. So hopefully those will be out soon. And again, if you haven't already, I would love if you would subscribe and join this channel and get excited about videos to come soon, because I'm very excited too. So thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.